I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capitol Download. We're at the Capitol with John Dingell, the congressman from Michigan, and the longest-serving member of Congress in American history. Thanks so much for joining us.
Delighted to be here, Susan. Thank you.
You have seen an incredible series of presidents on the job. I read that you were on the floor of the House when FDR came there to talk about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. You were a House page, is that right?
I was a House page. It was my job to see to it that a very conservative nabob of the media got to tape the president's remarks. And he was only supposed to be able to speak, or rather to tape the president's remarks, not the debate which followed. But I thought that debate was going to be sufficiently historic and sufficiently important that I let him tape it all. And you'll occasionally hear it. It's a very interesting discussion because the country was badly divided. And the president had a hard time selling the United States on helping Britain, which was about ready to go under to the Nazis. So he declared war on Japan the day after they bombed Pearl Harbor.
Who was the member of the media that you were supposed to be monitoring? Do you remember who it was?
I'll think of it. I was trying to think of it while I was talking about it.
And pretty remarkable, you were 16 and you decided to defy your bosses and let them keep recording.
History is sometimes written in strange ways, and sometimes even a kid can do that.
So I want to just have you briefly assess for us the string of presidents you've seen since then.
First of all, let's start with the first, Roosevelt. The giant. One of probably the three greatest. Truman, right behind him. He saved the country. He saw to it that we finished winning the World War II. I'm one of 500,000 Americans who's alive today. I was scheduled to be in the first wave into Japan. If it hadn't been for Harry Truman dropping the bomb on the Japanese, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. He also carried out what it was that Roosevelt intended in terms of seeing to it that the people were able to look to a formula for lasting peace. Oh, the man you ask, Fulton Lewis Jr.
Was the journalist. So just quickly through the presidents you have, or Eisenhower was president when you were sworn in.
And fine chairman of the board, pretty good golfer, but didn't do much.
Kennedy
never lived long enough, regrettably, to show what he could do. Ran a very, 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 very exciting, pleasant White House. But he was killed before he could actually show what he could do. Johnson finished. In fact, Johnson could say that he had largely completed the New Deal. Federal aid to education, war on poverty, Medicare, Medicaid, a whole bunch of other things that he did, including a lot of environmental legislation, cleaning up the waters, which were becoming so filthy you couldn't drink them or use them for industry purposes.
How about Richard Nixon?
Nixon, in the cold light of history, looks like a better president than he did when he was there. Had some considerable foresight on things like health and the environment, and a lot of other things. But the University of California at Davis ran a study of him in which they came to the conclusion that he was a paranoid schizophrenic.
Do you think that was true? You saw him close up?
If you looked at his behavior, you would have to come to the conclusion, and I speak as a layman, not as a doctor, but that was the right conclusion.
How about Gerald Ford?
Gerald Ford was a gentleman. Gerald Ford was a good president, not say a great president. But unfortunately, he carried the pardon that he gave to Nixon, which I thought was a terrible thing, but which I now think was a necessary thing. And Ford brought the country down, calmed it, settled it down. And interestingly enough, he was beaten by the far right wing. Frankly, as would have been Nixon, had he been around a little different time, and as would have been Goldwater.
How about Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter was a wonderful man, probably one of the best of our former presidents, very decent, good-hearted human being. Regrettably, he could see every tree in the woods, but he couldn't see the woods. And that handicapped him in terms of dealing with complex legislation.
What about Ronald Reagan?
I thought he was a very mediocre president. I thought he had the misfortune of being a president who showed signs of senility much earlier than it came out that he was. And I had several experiences with him in the White House that tended to show that was so.
How about the elder George Bush?
Fine gentleman. Member of Congress, always remembered the House, had a good war record, and accomplished decent things. He knew how to work across the aisle.
Bill Clinton, what did you think of him?
Oh, delightful fella. If Bill Clinton had not had one fault, he would have gone down as a great president.
The one fault being?
I don't need to tell you what it is. Ask any man or ask any woman, they'll tell you.
George W. Bush.
I was very fond of both Bushes. Extremely fond of George Herbert Walker Bush and extremely fond of George W. Bush. They both had great goodness in him. Unfortunately, George W. Bush allowed people to lie to him about Iraq and about going into battle in the Middle East. He didn't read history, and he had the misfortune of being one of probably the least concerned and historically interested presidents in the history of the country.
And finally, Barack Obama. How do you think history will judge Barack Obama?
More kindly than they do now. One of the interesting things is if you look, presidents are always judged more kindly in the cool light of history. It's particularly true in the case of Truman. It will be, I think, particularly true in case of Obama. I think Obama's biggest single problem is a staff weakness. He's a decent man. He wants to try and do a good job. But he has the misfortune of not having had the experience and not having had scar tissue. And this means that he wasn't hurt. You have to get cut up and sliced as you go through public life. And if you're not hurt, you don't get to understand what these things mean to the country and to the average guy. I don't think he really understood. He really had that. I think he'll go down as a good president. I think what he did on Affordable Care Act is a triumph. And I think he's a very, very decent, good-hearted, honorable man who is trying hard. But his staff is, I think, not as strong as they should be.
Congressman John Dingell, thank you for joining us on Capitol Download.
Thank you.